Ready when you are, John. Matt, are you ready?
Okay, so I'm going to call to order the September 5th, 2024 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission meeting held at the Don B. Griffin Room in Town Hall in Harwich. We're going to start with Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is a hybrid meeting. That is, participation is possible both in person and online. Anyone who is watching on TV who wants to participate online can find login directions on the agenda, which is published on the Town of Harwich website. The first order of business tonight is a notice of intent from Harwich Conservation Trust for Hinckley's Pond, Herring River Headwaters, Jenkins Bog, map 81, parcels G1, G2-1, G2-2, G2-3, and G2-4-1, and Jacob Brown 2, the Warner Bog, map 90, parcel B2, for ecological restoration.
They've asked for a continuation to our September 18th, 2024 meeting.
Can we have a motion?
I move to approve the continuance.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
301. Next item on the agenda is 11 River Bend Road, map 1, parcel G1-9, for the replacement of an existing wooden bulkhead, the installation of floats with scallop growing nets, and dredging at the base of the bulkhead to allow for scallop growing nets to remain submerged at low tide. Also, salt marsh restoration is proposed in eroded areas. Do we have a representative here who's going to be?
We have several, actually.
Okay, well, can you identify yourselves, please, and
Yes.
let us know what the sequence is here?
David Crispin, engineer with the BSC Group. Hannah Raditz is one of our environmental scientists who's also with us. And Jeff Lang should be in front of you somewhere there.
Okay,
I do have about 8 slides I'd like to share with you to give you the quick summary of where we are, if that's possible.
yes, please.
Share screen. Now, how did we do this last time? Select the screen to share.
So you know, in the
There
future,
we
you
go.
can get it to us ahead of time. We can have it prepared.
My apologies. Are you seeing this now?
No.
No, still not seeing it. Rats. It says I can't share a screen. Share a screen.
You are now the presenter.
The entire screen. That's this one.
There we go.
So I guess I am seeing you. My apologies on this. There's got to be a better way. Maybe if I reduce this share screen. I'm getting there, I think. How about this one? There we go. Are we seeing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Coastal Bank, yes, all right. There's about 8 slides here I'd just like to walk you through. We did meet with the Waterways Commission a week or so back, and
Excuse
as
me,
you know,
can you just put them on full screen so we get a better view of them?
I can do that, absolutely. Slideshow from the beginning.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Is that working better?
Not yet.
Not yet? So you're not seeing this?
Well, let's
Yeah,
not waste
it's-
more time with this. Why don't you just go
Yeah,
ahead?
well, this is really quite quick. We did meet with the Waterways Commission a little over a week ago, so we fully expect we're going to continue tonight. We understand this is really an informational meeting for you, so that we can learn of any more information you might like, or just bring you up to speed as to where we are. I think everybody knows where we are on the Herring River there, so that's the first slide. When we met with the Waterways Commission, they were concerned about encroaching into the deep water channel there. And the resolution at this point is to put in 4-foot wide floats at the bottom of this float system and bulkhead. And at the northern end, we'll use the same old 6-foot wide ones. Since we met with you last time, we did go out, we resurveyed the edge of the salt marsh, which is the critical piece. We can't push the bulkhead, the new bulkhead, into the salt marsh, but we can go right up against it. That allowed us to rotate the entire system in a counterclockwise dimension, which gave us about a 6-foot difference at the north end. Those two green lines show a rotation of that. That being said, I think the Waterways Commission was happy with that. The last discussion was about narrowing the two little floats at the bottom of the site. So just a little bit about the process, because there seems to have been a lot of confusion about this. We know we need to file a notice of intent under the Wetlands Act and with Harwich Wetlands bylaw. That's why we're here tonight. We also know we need to file a Chapter 91 license to modify the bulkhead. We also need an aquaculture permit from the selectmen for this particular site. We also need a shellfish license to raise shellfish that are undersized, and the applicant already has that in his possession. Because we're dredging, we need a water quality certificate from Mass DEP, and we need an Army Corps permit. You are the first step in all of this. So that's just a quick summary for the commission and the public that may be listening. Again, the key elements of this is to remove the existing bulkhead, replace the new bulkhead with a steel bulkhead, do some maintenance dredging to 6 feet deep at mean low water under the floats so we can do the aquaculture project, install wood piles and guardrails for the floats. The floats are proposed to be year-round, and there's mitigation. There is no salt marsh alteration. The restoration of salt marsh, because of the rotation, went from 450 square feet down to 200 square feet, and it's just a fact of rotating around the right point on that salt marsh. The applicant has also suggested of donating scallop seeding that can go anywhere in the town, and we've also discussed the denitrification benefit of that. So what happens here when we reconfigure this? The yellow line in this case is the existing bulkhead, and because you have a 200 square foot limitation in your bylaw that we've asked for a variance from, I wanted to point out that in front of the existing bulkhead, there's 485 square feet of float. There's an existing float in the upper right-hand corner that's 185 square feet. So we're really increasing in the existing waterway, 300 square feet of float. I just put that out there as a general understanding of what's going on out there. The crosshatch purple area on this behind the yellow is the salt marsh that gets restored, by the way. There's been discussion about whether this is maintenance dredging or not. The right side of this is the Chapter 91 license, which shows proposed dredging along here, along the bulkhead where we are. I'm going to show you that in another slide here. This is a CAD system overlay, because there's so many lines in this drawing, it's tough to see. But if you highlight it, I think you can see underneath here that this whole area along there is in that maintenance dredging cross-hatching. So we believe this is maintenance dredging. And although zoning is not usually applicable to wetlands permitting, there's been a lot of concern from the neighborhood that this is a problem, it's not permitted. I will point out to you that in the RL zone, which by the way, includes the river, most zoning only goes to the edge of the land. The RL zone goes right across the river, includes the water body, and that is probably because aquaculture is a permitted use by right in the RL zone. Also, in response to some of the comments from the abutters, that this is a commercial business and a commercial business doesn't really belong here. The zoning definition says that it has to be a science, art, business for cultivating marine. That's commercial. Your own bylaw, the wetlands bylaw, goes even further, and it says it must be commercial, municipal, or scientific in nature to be in aquaculture. So it has to be a commercial activity. That doesn't mean you're going to be bringing in big, giant, 40-foot scallop boats. There's still going to be small boats once in a while. It's not a highly intensive use. One last thing, and I'm not going to get a lot of technical into it, but we did receive a letter from Horsley yesterday, and I just kind of want to rebut this in simple terms. A claim that the project will modify the tidal exchanges with the salt marsh and likely result in additional losses of the salt marsh area. Quite simply put, this is untrue. The project will restore the tidal exchange to the condition that's existed for the last 70 years, and that in itself will protect the salt marsh from continued erosion. All tidal exchanges for this salt marsh have come in from the north, i.e. the little cove, not from over the seawall. Second, he says the project will result in higher groundwater levels in the salt marsh and modify its hydrologic regime. Again, this is untrue. Project will restore the tidal fluctuation to the condition that has existed for the last 70 years. The applicant has not clearly identified the wetland resource areas on the site plan. Well, the point in question is the area behind the bulkhead. This area is really, other than land subject to tidal action, it's not beach, it's not coastal bank. It's all shown on the plan. And lastly, in the shellfish evaluation, there was no evidence of shellfish behind that bulkhead, which is above the mean low water mark. And lastly, that the sheet metal bulkhead will redirect waves to adjacent areas. The bulkhead is a replacement project and will not alter wave energy significantly from the pre-existing condition. And with that, I think we just can open this to questions. That's the quick summary, unless Jess wants to say something.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things. Since we last saw this project, they have resurveyed the area. According to what you've submitted, Mr. Crispin, the original survey was done probably about 2 years ago. So you said you resurveyed the area, particularly looking at the existing edge of marsh in and around that bulkhead area. Is that correct?
That's correct. Correct, and it has moved landward significantly, which allowed this to slide back, which made the waterway larger
Yep.
at the end of the day.
Okay, so as such, they have changed the location slightly of their proposed bulkhead to move inland. The state did express concern, as in their initial review, they thought it could potentially be destruction of salt marsh behind that area if you were to push the bulkhead in the area that is slumped and denuded. However, I don't necessarily agree with that, because the definition of salt marsh is a coastal wetland extends landward up to the highest tide line, characterized by plants that are well adapted to prefer living in saline soils, and talks much more about plants than it does of sediment types there. So I would say that this area between what is clearly salt marsh and the bulkhead is intertidal zone, maybe some land containing shellfish because it's intertidal, certainly is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Doesn't really meet the definition of coastal beach either. So I do have some similar concerns that were expressed by Mr. Horsley, and hopefully we can vet those tonight. I do agree that the tidal regime is mainly coming in from the north. The bulkhead is low enough that during extreme tide events, you do get some tidal action or flushing of, or overwash of that bulkhead in places during extreme events. And you do get it through the wall. However, that is, because the wall is in bad shape, that you're getting flushing there. And that technically shouldn't be happening. Had the bulkhead been maintained as was permitted in the 1930s, in the 1930 license. Let's see, sorry, I'm looking at all my notes. Let's see. I apologize, there's a lot. I don't have too many other questions, I think, at this time. Let me just quickly go through here. Mr. Crispin, you had stated that there was shellfish survey done behind the bulkhead?
It was observed. There was nothing observed there. It's steep, sandy, steep, above the mean low water mark, excuse me.
So there was no actual
So it-
physical survey done?
Well, we didn't want to dig in there because of the holes in the wall. You start disturbing that soil and it's going to go through the wall and into the river.
Okay.
So
I'll leave that up to the commission about how to direct you.
Visually, no oysters visible. Visually, no squirts from clams or cohogs or anything like that down there. So the opinion was there is no significant shellfish in that area.
Okay. One question I still do have is the question that has come up about whether the proposed structure would cause adverse impact to adjacent properties, as it is in the flood zone. The proposed structure is at an elevation of 6.3, and you're proposing to go to an 8. You're well within a velocity zone of 15, so, you know, during a major storm event, it's not really gonna matter too much there, whether your wall is 6 feet or 8 feet. But I was just wondering if you could address this a little bit better, because I'm sure the neighbors would be concerned about this, and how this proposed structure, how you believe the proposed structure would not have an adverse impact to adjacent properties.
Well, in my opinion, it's essentially the same, even though it's a little bit higher, which we did primarily for sea level rise, documented known sea level rise, trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to say. But if this top of this is some 7 feet below the top of the velocity zone, not going to have a significant impact on wave refraction. Most of the waves are going to go right over it.
I guess, and just to mention to kind of the process here, this will go back in front of the Waterways Commission on September 18th. We're not moving on this tonight. We're kind of vetting some of the environmental concerns here. And this project will be, this hearing will be continued. They also are dredging more than 100 cubic yards of sediment, so they're going to need a 401 water quality certification. They're going to need relief from the state as they're dredging within 25 feet of a salt marsh. They'll need select board approval, just as another individual who was looking to do a kelp aquaculture project just within Nantucket Sound had to do. And so this is, as Mr. Crispin said, just kind of one of the first stops in the process here. I think that's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman. I'm just interested to hear what everybody else has to say.
Thank you, Amy. We're gonna now go to comments, questions from commissioners, starting with Wayne.
The only thing I see as a positive is, at this point, is that when they fill behind the proposed bulkhead, they're gonna replant it with beach grass, well, with marsh grass, and that would result in a net gain of salt marsh there. So to me, that's a good thing.
Thank you.
At this moment, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Sophia?
I'm just trying to remember to to the last time that this was presented, it is not, if this structure doesn't have to be replaced, is that right? Like, it either.
I have the license. I have the license.
You have the license.
So the license was given in 1930, and of course, if the owner knows, interprets this differently, please tell me. It says to license and maintain. Doesn't say have to maintain, and I'm not sure how attorneys would view that language, but it says this is to license and maintain the structure, and it is still valid. However, they are slightly changing the footprint of the structure, so they will need to technically amend the license.
And
then,
we're moving it at the Waterways Commission's bequest.
Correct.
my second point of clarification was just for the shellfish survey. It looks like the full footprint of the project area was not surveyed. Is that still true?
I can respond to that.
Take it, Hannah.
So, yeah, the shellfish survey that was conducted was with a one-man team. So the reason that he didn't do surveying behind the wall is due to safety concerns. The muck down there is quite deep, and there's not very good access. As one side you've got the eroding salt marsh, and the other side you've got the rickety bulkhead. So we didn't do excavations behind the wall or landward of the wall. Instead, visual observations were made of this area. There's mussel beds within the salt marsh, but at that edge where it's eroding, it's just so steep and eroding at such a rate that the mussel colonies can't keep up. It's likely that there could be shellfish within that area, but the shellfish within that area would be exposed to the eroding sediments and also irregular tide, with it coming in from both the north and the south, or north and the river. So the only excavations that were done for this shellfish survey, which was included in the report attached to the notice of intent, were on the Herring River side of the bulkhead, using an extended rake just to get those areas that would be occupied by the floats.
And is there any other area that they could be referring to as the full footprint? The rest of everything else was surveyed that could be affected?
We surveyed basically the length of the wall. So on the Herring River side, from the property line to the south, around the corner to the northern edge of where these floats will be going. So it's the seaward edge of that, and rather than the landward edge. There would be limited use in excavating within the salt marsh areas where we will be moving that back into. That's partially within those eroded areas of that salt marsh. As I mentioned earlier, it's quite dynamic. It's not conducive for long-term healthy populations of shellfish in that area. But we weren't able to go out as far as the dredging will propose, just due to access concerns and safety issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have first some questions about just the evolution of this area over the last maybe 10 years. I was looking at Google Earth and the historic pictures, photographs that are on Google Earth, and it appears to me from looking at that up until 2021, there was very little erosion behind the seawall. I mean, only the most recent photograph on Google Earth right now of that area, that is from sometime in 2023, that shows the degradation of the salt marsh behind the wall, looking somewhat like it's depicted in the drawing that Mr. Crispin showed today of the resurvey, where there's extreme cutaways further into the salt marsh. And actually, Sophia is pointing out to me this photograph that's in the most recent write-up from 2021, which is the Google Earth image, which doesn't show anywhere near that amount of erosion from 3 years ago. So I'm curious about an explanation for what happened in the last 3 years that made things degrade so dramatically. And the other sort of somewhat related thing, that if you go a little further back, looking at Google Earth back to 2016, there is what appears from the air to be another some kind of a wall or something running east to west in the more or less halfway between the tidal part of the north side and the actually there's a ditch that goes around the south side of this plot, but there was apparently some structure running west to east.
There was a walkway on the marsh which has since been removed.
So that was just a walkway, it was not another wall or revetment of
If what
something.
I think you're referring to is correct, it was a wooden walkway, boardwalk on top of the marsh, which has since been removed. There was also additional floats that the previous owner had installed on the seaward edge of that bulkhead that were not permitted and were required to be removed.
I see. So that answers the second half of my question. The first half is what happened in the last 3 years to cause what appears to be significant erosion inside the existing bulkhead.
We've had significant storms over the last couple of years. We knew that when we went back out to survey it, the applicant was telling us that he has visually seen it being eroding landward due to the wave action that's been coming in and flooding that area. Will that happen again in 5 years? Don't know, but it's happened a couple of times in the last 2 years.
So
The failure of the wall on the Herring River side also allows for water to come in and cause ice rafting and additional erosion of that already fragile edge. Even though it looked quite stable in those photos, there's a potential that it was already being undermined, and these storm events just were the last straw, and then they started to topple. And once those areas have lost their vegetation and stability, they can go pretty quickly with the right conditions of storm events and the winter conditions as well that would have been let in by the leaking water through the wall.
Okay, thank you.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
that's fine. There have been some significant holes formed in the front side of that wall. And the current is so fast going across the front of it, it acts like a venturi to pull, like little tornadoes get formed on the backside of the holes that is accelerating that erosion. So between the storms, like we had 3 storms last winter that the water was over the top of that entire wall. So I think between the storms and some of the holes that have formed in that wall, which is kind of what led me here to where it's figuring out what to do to repair it. It's got pretty high priority because I think a lot of that section could be potentially fall down, and I'd be fishing it out of the water.
So is that damage that's happened only over the last 3 years?
Yeah, a lot of it has. I've only owned it for 4 years, maybe. So I don't know how much, it wasn't in that bad a shape when we first purchased, but it started to go really fast.
Okay, thank you for that. I just have a comment also on what Sophia, sort of based on Sophia's comments. My feeling is that I understand your comments that you're concerned about safety, both of the people doing the work and disrupting things behind the bulkhead and causing more damage. On the other hand, it seems to me that this is a major project you're proposing here with clearly a lot of concern from your neighbors. And I think a bit more needs to be done to assess the situation with shellfish. We need something that you should be able to provide based on the work that you've already done, which is a map showing us where the samples were taken and what you found there. And I do think we need more information about shellfish behind the bulkhead one way or another before we can move on this, make any determination. And I think it's up to you to figure out how to do that in a safe and effective way. I don't think any of us are in a position to second guess how you would do that, but I think it needs to be done. So
Okay.
that's what I have to say. So the next phase here, we have just a few people in the room. I suspect some of them will have things to say. I'd like some indication from people online and on the room who's going to speak. I'd like to have some idea how many people want to take a turn to speak. If people in the room could raise their hands who want to speak, who intend to speak. I see 2 people.
And I'd like to request that someone who's online speak first. Elizabeth Pyle is
So
online.
is there more than one person online who wants to speak?
Mr. Horsley, who is the consultant who has opined on this project, has his hand raised there. Elizabeth Pyle has her hand raised. I'm seeing Mr. Horsley and Ms. Pyle.
Okay, so we have 4 speakers, and I will take them in the order that you would like to go. So, but I also just want to caution you to please keep your statements as brief and succinct as possible, and please keep them focused on the issues before us, which are issues related to permitting in a wetlands resource area. Other issues such as zoning and approval of shellfish licenses are not part of what we can take any action of, so please don't spend time tonight talking about that. So let's go with Ms. Pyle, is that correct to start with?
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Elizabeth Pyle. I'm an attorney at Hill Law, and I represent many of the neighbors to the site that I've listed in my letter to you. I am here tonight with Scott Horsley, who's our wetlands resources consultant. And like you said, he's already submitted a letter on the project, but he would like to speak about his analysis of the wetland resource area impacts for this site. After Mr. Horsley is done speaking, I have a few quick legal points that I'd like to bring up with you as well. So at this point, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Mr. Horsley, and then just to let you know, I'll say a few remarks when he's done. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Scott Horsley. Would it be possible for me to share my screen and just take a look at a couple of figures in my letter?
Yes,
I don't know
could
if
you
I'm
also
able to-
please speak up or get closer to the microphone? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes. And would you like to be made presenter, Mr. Horsley?
Yes, please.
Give us 1 minute. Okay, you should be able to share your screen.
Are you able to see this now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly will stick to, as you said, the wetland regulations. I guess this is just a copy of my letter, and I'm hoping I can scroll through it, so just give 1 moment while I can get over here. The first question, there are actually 4 points here, and I did submit this in writing, but I'll just paraphrase. So the first point here is whether or not this, the salt marsh is getting interaction both hydrologically as well as nutrients and biological connection along this eastern side, and I think it's pretty evident that it is. I think that, my understanding of salt marshes is they are dependent on a tidal interchange, as well as nutrient fluxes, as well as biological fluxes. And I believe that the space behind the existing wooden bulkhead and the salt marsh is providing that flux. It's also my understanding that the way the wetland regs works, we heard earlier about the last 70 years, but my understanding is the regs work as to what is the condition today. So that's the only thing I'm going to address is what I think is going on today. I'm not going to opine about the past 70 years or anything of that nature. So I think under current conditions, it's pretty clear that there is a interchange along this eastern side, which I think is providing part of the function of the marsh, salt marsh. And I do believe by filling this area and placing essentially a watertight wall, steel wall, low permeability, let's call it, it's going to dramatically change that. It's going to change the hydrology, it's going to change the biological fluxes, it's going to change the nutrient fluxes, and I just can't see how that won't have a detrimental effect on the salt marsh productivity. Let me go to the second. Actually, here's a photo, which I'm sure you've seen before, which I think pretty clearly shows plenty of water interaction on this eastern side. And again, I think we see the water, we don't see the nutrients, we don't see the biological fluxes, but they're clearly taking place. So the second point is the groundwater levels, and I heard the opinion that they don't think this will cause a groundwater effect. Again, the way I understand the wall is going to be, I'm not sure I can say watertight, but much watertighter or much lower permeability than existing condition. Putting a wall like that up against the salt marsh, we would, from a groundwater modeling standpoint, we consider that a boundary condition. Again, very low flux of groundwater, so I think it's reasonable to think that water table groundwater is going to back up against that wall. There is also evidence in the prior plan of some drainage swales which lead down from the salt marsh into that channel, as I referred to it, between the wooden bulkhead and the salt marsh. And by placing the wall immediately adjacent to the salt marsh as proposed, I believe in addition to the groundwater fluxes, the drainage from the salt marsh will be essentially captured and guided by the steel bulkhead. And I think that's a possibility of that providing erosion along that. And I think there's a good chance that the existing condition that we see with the wooden bulkhead will get repeated further inland with the steel bulkhead. I think that's primarily from tidal flushing coming in from the north and back and forth along that wall, as well as the runoff from the drainage that I mentioned briefly. Third point is the wetland resource areas, and I did provide this sketch from the revised plans, and I think we heard tonight from Mr. Crispin again that the water in that area is only above mean low water, and I don't believe that's the case, which was why I sketched this on the drawing. The drawing that's been submitted shows that the sediments behind the wall are always above mean low water, and you can see my cursor, I'm referring to this line. I've sketched in a dashed blue line, which I think is more representative, and I believe it does go below mean low water elevation, and I did go out there and took a photo, which is this picture here, and I think you can see pretty clearly the standing water here, and this was taken at mean low water. So what this indicates is that the land areas below that water would qualify as land under the ocean, and as I think you or somebody else, I think Agent Amy, if I get your name right, Amy, suggested that this could be an area that would qualify as land containing shellfish. So I agree with the comment or suggestion that this should be evaluated, because it looks like it potentially qualifies as, definitely qualifies as land underwater, land under the ocean, excuse me, as well as potentially land containing shellfish. The only way to do that is to get the the samples that you've indicated. And then lastly, on the theme of velocity zone, I guess somebody already said it. So the wall is going to be increased in elevation. I think the applicant has suggested that the wave energy would be directed parallel along the wall upstream, which I think that makes sense. But by raising the wall, it's going to, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to reflect additional storm surge beyond what it does now, simply because it's higher. So I think an evaluation of that makes sense, but I think it's hard to imagine how somebody could say there will not be any change in that. If you're raising the wall, you're certainly going to capture and redirect higher storms and wave energy above existing elevation. So I think I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. I think that pretty much covers my comments, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I think we should stop here and allow for some questions from the commissioners. Starting with you.
I'm wondering if you can clarify, in your opinion, is the best thing for the wetland resource to not change anything, Mr. Horsley?
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I certainly did not evaluate that. I only evaluating, like I said, existing conditions, and I think there is a resource area that needs to be taken into account that is not currently taken into account. I have not evaluated other options, if that's what you're asking me, as to how to best preserve the salt marsh. I think that's probably a good idea, and alternatives analysis might make some sense.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have anything.
Sophia asked my question, so, thank you. So shall we proceed?
I think they asked Attorney Pyle.
Oh, Attorney Pyle, yes, wanted time to make. a few
Thanks very much. I do have some points that I'd like to discuss with you as well. Some of these I raised in my letter, but they still haven't been addressed even in these latest plans. The first thing that we like to request is a peer review, and this is along the lines of what we've been talking about, where we need to really determine what resource areas are here on the site, if there's land under ocean, if there's land containing shellfish. And I really appreciated the commissioner's suggestion about having a more thorough shellfish survey, because it's impossible to determine the project impacts without knowing what resource areas you really have on the site. And I would like you, it's good that you're encouraging the applicant to do that, but I would also request a peer review of the shellfish survey and a peer review of their wetlands delineations, particularly where there have been a lot of adjustments on their plans that haven't been accounted for. Another matter that I want to raise with you is that there is still a property line issue with the property of David Kelleher at 9 Riverbend. And if you look at their plans, you can see that there's a lot of black line congestion right in the area where their bulkhead meets up with the Kelleher property, but they're showing a 1 to 2 foot gap in that area, but their bulkhead still is on the Kelleher property, which is, the property boundary is the gray line, not the black line. And although we understand that there may need to be some coordination, they have not coordinated with us in any way. They're still showing work on our property without our permission. And the current proposal to just back it off 2 feet is not acceptable either, because that will create a channel of wave action and lead to significant scouring and velocity as the water goes into that 2 foot channel at force. So the current proposal to back off a foot is completely unacceptable, and they do need to coordinate with us if they are going to do work on our property. And they have not done that to date, which is troubling, even when we raised this before the Waterways Committee. So there's that issue. And then I also want to call out some discrepancies in the plans. The latest plan set that was just submitted, dated August 5th, no, I'm sorry, the one that was just submitted, August 29th, it calls for nets on those plans. And the letter that is associated with that was submitted at the same time says cages for what's going to be on the floats. So we don't know if there's nets or cages because the plans refer to nets, the letter refers to cages, and we're concerned about this, particularly where recreation is a value under the Harwich wetlands bylaw. And that's not in the Wetlands Protection Act, that's unique to your bylaw, but the recreational interest can include swimming and boating, and we're concerned that swimmers could be entangled in nets. So we would like to know exactly what the mechanism is for these scallops to be grown in. Another concern that we have is that this latest plan set is almost impossible to read with so many black lines showing both the proposed bulkhead, the property line, the existing bulkhead. There's black lines on top of black lines with black arrows pointing to them that are obscured by the black lines. So we would request that you ask the applicant to file a more clear plan set, perhaps with an existing conditions sheet and a proposed condition sheet rather than having everything on top of each other, or at least with different colors and shading so that they can be read clearly. And that will enable the commission and the public to have a thorough review of what is being proposed here. Finally, I note that the harbor master submitted a letter where, in terms of navigation, he said that there were 10 floats proposed, but in the most recent plan set that you have, there are 20 floats proposed. So that's a difference, and I would like, if possible, if the applicant could clarify how many floats, but the latest plan set says 20. The one that was most recently before the Waterways Committee said 10, and the harbor master said that he would only support 6. So that's another concern that we have. And then finally, I guess just to address one of your comments about is there going to be a gain of salt marsh area if this project happens this way, and there'll be new restoration of salt marsh? Will that be a gain of salt marsh? And that is not a given here. And in fact, what I would say is that if they move the bulkhead landward, they're just going to create a new channel of erosion behind the new bulkhead, and that will erode more salt marsh, and then there'll be a loss of salt marsh, notwithstanding whatever they try to do in replication. So these are adverse impacts to the salt marsh under both the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw that need to be considered. And I guess just in summary, we feel like this project needs a lot more work to clearly explain what they're doing and to clearly evaluate the shellfish area and the wetland resource areas. And so we would like a lot more detail to be submitted. But thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, well, there were a lot of points in there. I have 2 or 3 different questions, but Amy, do you want to speak?
Just really briefly, I would agree that the plans are a little bit tough to read as they are just black and white, and there's a lot of overlapping lines. So if the plan can be clarified, either color-coded or do an existing versus proposed side by side, that would make our review much easier. The only thing for now.
So I have several questions. One is, what would you consider to be a sufficient peer review? What do you envision that entailing? Who do you envision being involved in a peer review of these plans? And the shellfish question.
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you since you were the one suggesting it.
Sure. So typically, what we see in these kinds of situations is that the commission would hire an independent peer reviewer, a third-party consultant that would advise the commission on whether the resource area delineation and the shellfish survey is accurate. And that is something that's typically done. And you could put out to bid for a third-party reviewer to take a look at this. They would go visit the site and give their analysis and see what they agree with.
Okay, thank you. You're talking about a third-party review, I understand. So then you made some points about too many black lines and overlap. Well, you were saying that the proposed work was impinging on the neighbor's property and that there was a 2-foot channel that was narrowed down to 1 foot. I wasn't following where any of that was. I would really appreciate somebody pointing out on the plans what you're talking about.
Sure, I referenced this in my letter, but if you look at the southern edge of the property where it meets up with the property owned by David Kelleher, and on the property line, you'll see, or on their plan, they show the property lines, and at the southern part below the site is property owned by David Kelleher at 9 Riverbend Road, and there's a reverse L-shaped bulkhead in that area, and it's at the extreme southern part of the floats. So it's the edge of this property and the abutting property, and it looks to us from their own plans that they are doing work on the Kelleher property. They're over the light gray boundary line and onto the neighboring property, and the proposed new location of the bulkhead stops about 1 foot short of the existing bulkhead, but is still on the Kelleher property. So these are issues that need to be resolved.
So you're also referring to some channel that's there, and that's part of what I was pointing out in the Google Earth photos, is there seems to be a ditch or a channel that runs right along that property line.
Yes,
I'm just wondering.
that's not,
Excuse me?
but that's not what I was referring to there. What I was saying, there's the channel behind the bulkhead
Yeah.
that is caused by the tidal action behind the existing bulkhead. But what I was referring to is if you have the new bulkhead coming in and a 1 or 2 foot gap with David Kelleher's existing bulkhead, when wave action comes through, it's going to create a new channel going into both properties that could damage both properties there. Because when you have a narrow restriction on wave action, it will create a channel. And that's clearly outlined in the coastal zone manual when it talks about adding structures in the velocity zone. But I could provide that citation to you, or an additional letter if you'd like more information about it.
Yeah, I think I understand what
Maybe
you're
we can
saying, but it
simplify
wouldn't
this.
hurt to document that in a letter.
Sure, I can do that. Right.
So is that it? I don't think we have more questions from the commissioners. Mr. Crispin, were you trying to make a point?
Is Mr. Lang still in the room?
He is.
I understand he talked with the abutter today, and there's no issue with that, was my understanding.
Dave Kelleher.
We've got to connect the two walls.
Please, if you're going to
I can't-
speak, please come up to the microphone.
After the last Waterways meeting, I went down because I've been a good friend of Dave Kelleher's for quite some time. And there was a misunderstanding about future long-term projects as compared to what we're trying to do. And he was very apologetic that any comments about he and I not communicating was passed on, that he felt was not true, and had offered the ability for, if we have to do soil samples to test before we do the pilings, that we would have access through his driveway to be able to get there to do it, and that he would be more than happy to work with us on the details of exactly how best practices join two steel bulkheads. And that he was very comfortable that those details can get worked out. I know when we were looking at the plans even today and talking about it, we're not sure that his bulkhead isn't a couple feet onto his property, on exactly where the property line is, but the reality is, no matter where the property line is, we'll have to attach our steel bulkhead to his steel bulkhead in an acceptable fashion. And so I will get in writing from Dave Kelleher that there are no issues about us working together to make that project work correctly.
Well, the bottom line isn't your relationship with Dave Kelleher, it's the final plan and us having an understandable plan that doesn't show gaps that could cause erosion. And without that, we can't really move on this project. So if, yeah, you
The
need to
plan
work
does
that out
not
with
show
your
a gap.
neighbor. Excuse me, one moment, please. You need to work that out with your neighbor, and I think the comments that the plan is confusing, I absolutely agree with. And I don't know whether it's just sloppiness and putting the plans together. You're not showing things lined up with property lines, and certainly there's a concern about that. So if you could just get that stuff straight and present a more understandable plan, that
Will
would
do.
be very helpful.
Yep.
Mr. Crispin, do you want to talk?
Yes, the intent of the plan is to not have a gap between the two seawalls at all. So that means we need to extend over the property line of the abutter by about a foot or two to connect those two. We can't leave a gap. Everybody understands that and agrees that. As far as other comments, the question of nets or cages, the net is made out of wire mesh, so it's a cage. Call it a mesh, call it a net, call it a cage, but it's a wire mesh product. The number of float comments, it's the total length that's the same. We have reduced the overall length of each float from 20 feet long down to 12 feet long, so there's more floats to make the same length. But those details are on the plan. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
So one other thing, just for historic clarity. This is a man-made salt marsh we're talking about. This was created in 1930 when that revetment bulkhead was put in place. We're trying to save that man-made salt marsh. And sadly, every week or month of delay jeopardizes more salt marsh, because we still have a long way to go from a permitting perspective to get to a point where we physically can do construction. So anything we can do to expedite that would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So I think we are done with the online presenters, and who is next from in the room?
Is it okay if I go next?
Certainly.
You can either go to the podium or the table, whichever you prefer.
I'll just go to the table. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Noreen Cahalan. Just to address your question earlier, what's changed in the last 3 years? The only thing that has changed is Jeffrey Lang bought the property. He bought the property in 2021. So that's the only difference. Here, Google, he owns the property, and that's the only change. As far as, they're trying, they bought property that's a half-acre lot, and they're trying to claim the public waterway as their own, to privatize it. They want 1,200 square feet of floats that would be permanent, and, that would then become their part of the river. So we would allow someone to privatize, just because they own a home that is on the water, they're trying to claim the water in front of that home as their own. And the floats are not supposed to be permanent, they're supposed to be temporary, according to our own town harbor management plans, so that the sun can get through to the bottom and shellfish and other can grow. So all floats are supposed to be out of the water for 6 months, not permanent. So not only are they, trying to privatize the waterway, they're trying to have, it's only supposed to be 200 feet of floats. They're asking for a variance of 1,000 more, and to have it be permanent, not temporary. That's a lot of issues that they're asking for a lot of variances. I'm trying to think of, you said only the things that address you, so I'm trying to stick to that. You know, I just want you to be aware that there's a lot of concern from the neighbors. We do not think that this is the right location for this and do not want it to happen. And I just want to present that. And the other point I wanted to make was the Waterways Committee requested that they survey the land to determine if they are in Mr. Callahan's land. And as far as I know, they haven't done a survey yet. But, you know, that is something that Waterways Committee asked for, and I would think that, you know, Conservation Commission would want that as well. But I just want to address that there's a lot of issues, and I don't think the town of Harwich should allow the privatization of the waterway. And I'll just leave the comments at that. Thank you. I did write a letter as well, and if you could all take the time to read my letter, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments?
No.
There was another, at least one more. Yes.
I just have a question.
Please step up to the microphone and identify yourself.
My name is Beth Larson, and I'm a resident of Harwich, neighbor. And my question is, because I don't really completely understand what the Harwich Conservation Commission is responsible for, are you all responsible for the scenic nature of the river, of Herring River?
No.
Okay. And are you responsible for any of the commercialization of the Herring River?
I don't think in any direct way, no. I mean, Amy might
No,
say something
the
different.
purview of the Harwich Conservation Commission is to uphold the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Harwich Wetlands Bylaw. Aesthetics or scenic views are not part of our purview, and the use, whether it's residential, commercial, that is also, we look at the activity and how it affects resources, not what it's characterized as. So commercialization, which is what you're bringing up and what you brought up, it would be something to talk with when they have to go to the the select board for
Right.
licensing.
Okay. And the scenic nature, that would also be the select board?
That's something that you could bring up at that meeting, but I don't know if there's any committee necessarily responsible for that.
I don't.
The scenic or recreational nature of the river, I mean. Okay. And then my second question, and pardon me if this is not in your purview, but does the town of Harwich have any overall plan for the commercialization of the Herring River?
There is no plan.
That's all I have. Thank you.
So we had,
I just have.
please,
Oh,
come to the
sorry.
microphone. You can stand at the podium if you like, or either one.
Sorry, I just have a comment that recreation is something that in the Harwich bylaws or the harbor management plan, it is something that is in the plan. Recreation is part of what is allowed, and, you know, so it is something that, maybe it's not your purview, but somebody, you know, recreation of the Herring River is a right. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Yes.
Dorothy Hayes, and I just wanted to know what the, in seeking a variance, what the overriding public interest is of this project. It's the third component for granting variance.
Well, people probably have different points of view. I don't know, Amy, do you want to?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
In seeking a variance under the regulations,
Yes.
you have to demonstrate that you can't meet the performance standards. You have to exhibit mitigation, and the third is you have to establish that the project serves an overriding public interest. So I'm just curious what the public interest is in this project.
Well, I can give you, there's more than one public interest here, right? One is nutrient loading of Nantucket Sound, which claims are being made by the proponents that they're going to reduce nutrients. Now, you can go and look at what the target reduction in nitrogen is compared to what they're claiming is going to happen, and draw your own conclusions about whether it matters or not. Another is the state of the Herring River, and part of the public interest is the preservation of the salt marsh. Another part of public interest is the preservation of an open channel going up the Herring River. And those are possibly conflicting interests that, you know, we have to take those things into consideration here. If you have some other statement about what you think the public interest is, then you should speak up and articulate that.
Well, I don't know what it is. And generally, with variances, they're granted for public projects, for public health safety, mass transit, treatment plants, schools, of that broad nature. I mean, these have potential positive environmental potential. We don't know, but potential positive impacts. But in terms of variances are rare and not in terms of being issued, at least under the department's regulations. So I didn't see the overriding public interest stated in the filing, so that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Maybe that's a suggestion to the proposers. Anything else? I don't see anyone in the room. Anyone online? I do not see anyone online, so I think we can close. We're not closing this hearing, but I think we're done for the moment, and what we need to do is continue, right?
Correct.
You're considering something here?
Well, I was just looking at our variance language. It just kind of spurred me to look at our variance language, which may be a little bit different about the public interest. So in our bylaw, or sorry, our regulations, would grant a variance from our regulation upon a clear and convincing showing that the proposed work or its natural and consequential impacts will not adversely affect the interests of this bylaw. We're supposed to take into account other reasonable alternatives and mitigation which would permit the proposed work without deviating from our provisions. Let's see. We can grant a variance so as to avoid a taking without compensation, and we can also consider hardship. So maybe it's in the state regulation in regards to variances about public interest. It does say desirable relief may be granted if there is neither substantial detriment to the public good or nullification or substantial derogation from the notice of intent of this bylaw. So it doesn't clearly kind of state, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, I'm just saying that's what our regulations state. It doesn't seem that there's a lot of language about public interest here in our regs. So, not saying that's not important, I'm just saying it's not in the papers.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
I just want to pick something out, Amy, from that I just read in your notes for this that I've been thinking about throughout this whole thing, and I feel like it's sort of important, which is that like the project's a little bit, it's two pieces, and I think that I wonder if the scallops weren't a question here, you know, would there be this objection to replacing the bulkhead as being the best thing for the salt marsh? And that's where it's just getting a little bit muddy for me, like parsing this out, because that's our job is, well, that's half of it, right? So it just, if we're looking at the best interest of the salt marsh, you know, is replacing the bulkhead versus letting it fall apart the best thing for the salt marsh? And then the scallop question it just brings up other issues, and I just offer that for consideration, that I don't know if there is a way to think about them separately or apply for them separately, but it seems like everything's just kind of getting a little bit tangled up, so that's all, just a comment.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we continue this until October 2, 2024.
Second.
Amy?
Is that amenable to the applicants? Does that give you enough time to do some of the things that you've been requested to do? Okay. October 2nd.
Okay, anything further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we have
Maybe we'll give the room a minute to clear out.
Sure.
And by all means, if you have to have conversation, you can have it out there.
Close the doors first, though.
Yeah. No offense, we have other things. Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
All right.
now we have the notice of intent for 35 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel F1-0, for installation of a permanent dock.
And
Good
Wayne-
evening, again. Is there something I said? I don't know.
No, I was gonna let you know that we have your stuff electronically if you need,
Oh,
if you need it to be.
Good.
And,
Thank you, Amy.
yeah,
Yeah, my name is Wayne Tavares. I'm from Wet Tech Land Design, and we've been at this dock and upland area for a while. In good faith, we came back and, as promised, and provided all the information that was requested. But we're going to throw a curve at this. First of all, what we did is we identified the coastal bank. It goes above the bulkhead. So we did that. We also get the engineer to do the calculations, recalculate what I had done as far as the amount of dredge that was there, and his sheets are in here and stamped. And let's see, also, you have a profile of, and a figure 4 for the type of coastal bank that it is. And, oh, we provided the plans stamped as required. You wanted the engineer, who stamped them in the beginning, to stamp this phase of the calculations. You also wanted me to provide core roll technology for a single roll at the bottom. Hopefully, we're going to make that a mute case. What we'd like the board to do, and we understand that Waterways is already, and I think you understand that Waterways has already passed this project and given you some advice. That's their capacity as advisory. And you still have, of course, to look at the dock yourself. And you have. You've begun it with dredging and all that. Right now, I'd like to say it's gotten complicated. In the very old days, I brought this up at the first meeting, we used to separate water-dependent projects from non-water-dependent projects, and lately all the commissions have said, bring the whole thing in. We'd like to go backwards. We'd like to say, let's look at the dock and the stairs, that's it. And we'll provide a revised plan for taking everything else off of this plan. So we're looking at a water-dependent project, separate from the other project, and we'd like to provide a revised plan. We'd like your comments on the dock. We've gotten to the dredging part, the construction part of the dock, the stairway portion, etc. So that's where we stand. It's very simple. We think that this project deserves a separate look at each issue. So please let me know that I can provide a revised plan that just shows the stairway, its construction, and also the dock and its construction. Please.
You want me to talk?
Why are you talking?
So I was gonna recommend approval tonight for the whole thing.
Okay, yeah.
I was gonna recommend approval for the dock, the platform, the planting, the whole 9 yards.
Whoops. Yeah.
So how would you, I mean, that's my recommendation, I don't have a vote.
No.
But do you wanna hear what the rest of the commission has to say before you ask for separating things?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you for the things that you have provided, the new things you have provided, the new dredge amount. There's an average of 1 foot of material needed to be dredged and a total of 87.3 yards. I do wish we had a plan that showed the actual transects of the shellfish survey. That's something that we typically see. However, in this case, because it is replacement of an existing dock, and it's because we changed our regulations to, our bylaw to require 3 feet at mean low water and not 2 or 2.5, that they actually have to dredge. Because when the dock was originally installed, they didn't have to do that. So because we're requiring it to go deeper, they had to dredge, which meant, so I don't necessarily think we have to hold, I would love to see the shellfish survey kind of plotted on a plan like we normally do, but in this case, it's replacement of an existing and improvement of existing, so I'm not too worried about it. It's not a surprise that this is a high shellfish area. There's a numerous species and sizes found, which is not unusual for this section of the harbor. There's decent substrate there. It's a rebuild, so I don't feel like that can be denied for any good reason, to rebuild it to the best of, to meet as many of our regulations as possible. I do think that it would leave the site in better condition than it is now. And I recommend approval of the platform because upon review, believe it or not, we have a no disturb zone for no new structures within the 0 to 50 foot resource, but this is in the resource itself. It's on the coastal bank. And the performance standards is it's not gonna have an adverse impact to the coastal banks, and it, in the way that it provides storm damage prevention and flood control, and I don't think the installation of this platform would. And I think they've provided enough mitigation in terms of removing that large stand of knotweed and other invasives and removing an area of lawn that I could see recommending granting the variance for it. So I recommend approval for your project as without modification.
Wayne?
I don't have anything.
I agree completely with Amy. I see the net value in the project in its entirety as it was presented. So that's where I stand.
I have no questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your comment.
I don't
She
have any
has no
questions.
question.
Oh, okay.
And I agree with Amy. I don't want to see you come back with another piece of the project. You probably don't want to come back with another piece of the project either. So
It's a nice ride to Harwich.
Harwich is a great town.
So it's up to you how you want to proceed.
No, if you want,
Sorry.
well, I don't know, aside from what's up to him, what are our choices here? Can we just approve
Well-
the plan originally presented and leave it at that?
I have a question. So did you go back to your client and did your client say,
Yes.
tell you they only want to do the dock right
Yes,
now? So would the client, the thing is, if we approve the project as presented, we're almost making them do the restoration.
So the key question here is a variance for the structure on the bank, right? Isn't that the only thing that complicates things here?
That's off the table too. The perch, is that what we're
The
talking about?
perch would be off the table,
Off
though.
the table too, yeah.
They would remove that from their plan. So, one thing we're doing, so,
Yeah.
one thing we could do, we don't ever close hearings. We vote pending orders of conditions.
Okay.
If you wanted to, the 2 weeks to talk to your client, saying the commission seems mostly amenable to the entire project in its entirety,
Right.
we
right.
could have a very quick meeting next time.
Okay, choices are good, choices are good. I think I'll take that option. Let me talk to the client. Let me
You
say
can call
that
me,
we have
too.
two things. Let me clear it with the board. We have two issues here. We have clear passage of the amended dock, amended licensed dock, and the stairway as a water-dependent project. Because it's inclusive.
With shellfish mitigation,
With shellfish mitigation, which was advised by
which would be a
Waterways.
requirement
We
of ours
know what that
anyways,
is.
yeah.
And the upland, I'm just gonna call them water dependent, because that's what that is. And then non-water dependent was the way we came in with the original copious plan with everything involved, non-water dependent, which is the coastal bank and so forth. Let me talk to the client for 2 weeks and just say that basically, both of these projects are approved. One independently, am I saying that right? I wanna make sure of that.
Well, I haven't really had a chance to think about it independently. If it's just a water-dependent structure, is the structure, it's proposed to be smaller than the existing structure, or bigger?
No difference in size. The
Okay,
existing-
because that would trigger additional, a larger square footage of dock from existing. If it was larger, it's gonna trigger a 4-to-1 mitigation requirement in structure. I don't think that you're bigger. I don't know if you are.
Mean bigger than the original?
Right.
No,
You're
no,
lower.
smaller.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
You're
we're
smaller.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the only thing you'd have to do is shellfish mitigation, is shellfish for the new dock and dredging.
Okay.
Love to see the rest of it happen though, too. So,
Okay. I know it's a surprise, and I'm sorry, but, and I appreciate what you're offering. This is like above and beyond, and very unusual in a conservation commission. So if I could get the 2 weeks, I'd appreciate it.
September
Do I
18th.
need to show up on that 2
I-
weeks? Or is that a thing I can call in to close, or appear on the?
I think appearing virtually would be fine,
Minimum, okay, all right.
so you don't have to drive down.
Okay, all right, yeah, that's great. Oh, I appreciate it, thank you so much. I'll have my client think about it, and,
And get in touch with Amy, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to them about
Okay.
the benefits of this.
Okay.
So, the next meeting date would be September 18th. It's a
it's
Wednesday.
easy, yeah, I'm gonna say yes to that, okay?
Okay, so we need to continue.
Yes.
I'll move to continue
I'll second that.
To September 18th.
to September 18th.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you.
night.
All right, you too.
Okay, next is a notice of intent for 2 Rebecca Road, map 57, parcel 31-1 for the construction of a horse barn and paddock.
Good evening. David Little from Ryder and Wilcox, and I'm here with Hannah Green next to me, and her husband Matt Sherman is over in the front row. What Hannah would like to do is construct a paddock and a 10 by 28 barn on the rear of her property. We've submitted a site plan, and we're over 100 feet away from the wetland, but we are within the Herring River riverfront area. So what I'm going to start off with right away is just providing you with some, if you could pass this around, if you just start at one end, if you could just look at this. I probably wasn't as clear as I should have been in my narrative, or I should have included those. It's just those 4 pictures that you're looking at. The area where we're proposing the paddock and the barn is a previously altered area. It's prior to where storing vehicles, as you can see in those pictures, it was a pig farm. So it's a riverfront. We have criteria that Amy has explained to me that I need to address, which I expect I'm probably gonna have to come back to another meeting to do. But I wanted to point out to the commissioners that the area behind the house has been altered and used in the past as a pig farm a long time ago, and then we have photographic reference of how it was just an area where vehicles were stored. There's pipes, there's still things out there in the ground. So what I'd like to point out is that we exceed the threshold of doing more than 5,000 square feet of work in the riverfront, but we're maintaining that it was previously altered. So where we're exceeding that threshold, this area, and I also included in the, along with the project narrative, I included an aerial photograph, a GIS image of the site, which shows that you can see how it's, as you get closer to the river, it's natural and wooded, but you can see how it's been cleared previously in the site. So what we're proposing to do is construct the paddock. Hannah would like to provide a screened sand base for her horse. The property already slopes from the south to the north a little bit. I showed spot elevations on the plan of how we could do a slight amount of cutting on the north side and a slight amount of filling, cutting on the south side and a slight amount of filling on the north side to accomplish this. Beyond that, the area, so I guess what I'm a little confused about is specifically what you need from us to get this project to the next level with working in the riverfront. And if you feel that this is an appropriate use of working in the riverfront, given the fact that it has been used and abused in the past. And when Hannah first came in, I thought this was an innocuous use. I thought she wanted to have a horse out back and constructing a paddock with a sand surface would be an easy thing to do. I was thinking that the Board of Health regulations, which are significant in the town of Harwich for having a horse, would be our bigger hurdle, but I'm kind of at the point now where I'm wondering what additional you need from us to do the project, and what, if you feel additional mitigation is needed. I could adjust the paddock a little bit on the plan so it fell within the existing edge of clearing and that we wouldn't have to do any additional clearing within that open area. Did commissioners get an opportunity to go to the site?
Yeah, I went.
Okay. I just thought that it helped me seeing the site. I felt that was an appropriate use, so. That's kind of my presentation. I figured this was a introductory meeting, and I didn't expect to go out with a approval this evening. We still don't have a DEP file number. I have to provide more information to DEP, but I'll cut it off there. I know you're having a long evening, and I'll take questions from the commissioners. And Hannah and her husband can answer some historic questions about the property as well.
Okay. Thank you. Unless you want to speak now, I will. Amy?
Anything else for,
No, I just would like to say, me and my husband, I work for the town of Orleans, he works for the town of Yarmouth, so we bought in Harwich, because it's right in the middle of where we both reside, and also because in that area there is a lot of horse barns. I know two friends of mine that live in that area. Harwich does have a very high horse community, and that is another reason why we came here. Conservation areas, one of my favorite things to do is trail ride, so that's another draw that I came here, and with the hopes that I could have, my horse in the backyard to fulfill those desires after we purchased a home. We're lucky enough to purchase a home in Harwich. So.
Okay, thank you.
well, I'm not at all opposed to the use. I think we can get there in some fashion. Really, the regulation, it's the state regulations for me that where you need to clarify more, and obviously we interpret the state regulations. So the questions that you receive from DEP are really my questions as well. An alternatives analysis, which is required by the state, and was not provided, needs to be provided. So you're supposed to look at a location. Is there anywhere on the site that is where it would be less impactful? Can you pull it away from that 100-foot buffer a little bit? Could you reorientate things to have less disturbance in the 1 to 200-foot riverfront area? The state allows up to 5,000 square feet of alteration, or 10% of the riverfront area on the lot, whichever is greater, and for you it's at 5,000. What you're proposing is 5,200, so that is over the state requirement. I would love to see a little bit more explanation, David, about the degraded area, because there's a difference between degraded area and redevelopment within developed riverfront areas. This is not a developed riverfront area. I do understand it has been impacted by various people at various times. When were these photos taken? I didn't want to take them out of their thing to look at the back.
Those were prior to our purchase, so I think that was when the house was built in 2003.
2003, so it's been a while, just because it looks, it's almost reclaimed itself a little bit over time back there. I did notice when I met you out there, probably 4 or 5 substantial trees that look to have been removed within the past year or so without permit. So I'm a little concerned that there already has been additional alteration out there prior to application. So I think for me, you just need to address the Rivers Act standards, and the commission needs to decide as well. Normally, we look for 2-to-1 mitigation in that 1 to 200-foot area, and that's normally for structure. So it would, the fencing and the barn, but you are proposing to kind of alter, proposing to regrade and put a new surface down. I think it's reasonable to ask for some level of mitigation for that. Maybe not fully the 2-to-1 that we would require, probably something less than that, but you are altering the surface. I'd also like your plan to more clearly show what your grading is proposed to be. There is, it's not a significant slope, but there is a slope, and you had expressed that you needed it to be flat for safety and whatnot of riding in that area. So we need a plan that shows
I'm trying
grading.
to keep it between 1% and 2%, so
Yeah.
it's essentially, yeah.
But if we could have a little clarification on that, that would be helpful. And is there anything needed on that northeast side where you're going? So what I'm curious is are you bringing the grade up, or are you just essentially taking down from one area and moving over?
Yeah, so I did,
Yeah.
talk to a contractor, so it wouldn't be like he is removing anything from the area, he'd be using
What's there?
What's there to, just disperse it to the other side to level it out. The only thing that he would be taking from the property would be any debris that is found in that area as a result of, the past.
Right.
But he would just be repurposing the area to make it level.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess my next question would be to the commissioners, would it be allowable for us to provide mitigation just for the structure rather than for the entire paddock, which is going to become a pervious surface with a horse in it?
Well, let's get comments
I'm
and
good,
questions
so.
from Commissioners, starting with Wayne.
Okay.
I don't have anything at the moment. I gotta think a little more about this. I don't have anything.
I have a couple of points. I'm not opposed to anybody having a horse. I guess my question would be, could it be a consideration to turn the whole paddock 90 degrees, move the barn just outside the 200-foot line to take away that restriction? And rather than the trench drain that you specified, perhaps a berm on the perimeter. You're gonna balance the grade anyway to obtain some sort of a surface for an arena. The berm would contain any washing, and if it was coated with any number of organic materials, it would promote the understory, which would be advantageous to the reconstruction of the natural area.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. After hearing all this, I understand that the three of us need to get together and talk about a somewhat reconfigured location here, but I don't think we're gonna be able to get it completely out of the riverfront, Mark.
No, not the whole thing. I'm just saying the barn itself, right? Get the actual building outside the 200-foot line, because you've got room there to do that. Brings it a little bit closer to the house. But if
Okay.
you took the whole paddock area and turned it 90 degrees, let it go north to south rather than east to west, you've got enough width there in the property. And if you've got a berm on the perimeter of it, that's going to ensure a little bit of privacy and a little bit of, maybe a
Okay.
little bit of respect to the neighbors. Not everybody wants a riding arena in their backyard, but some people don't mind it.
And without designing your project for you, I was kind of thinking a like a 90-degree twist potentially too, to get more of it outside the 200 if you could.
Yep.
And pull a little bit away from that 100-foot line if you can.
Yeah.
But
And-
that's up to you folks.
Okay, yeah, well, I think we can meet at the site and we can explore that. Just so you understand, that will require more grading because the ground slopes. We need
Well,
a
that's-
relatively
okay.
level riding area, so, because it slopes north to south.
Understood.
That would be a necessity for us.
I guess it's an alternative to explore.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have any issue with the way that it is right now, and I think it would be reasonable just to mitigate for the structure. I was gonna say, I don't know, I'm having a hard time picturing your berm, but bear with me, like, if there's a trench drain and, like, it's pitched so any runoff, like, I guess the biggest thing would be like the manure, right? To soak up the nutrients from that, you could plant on the other side of the drain to help filter whatever like excess nutrients are coming off, but I think the berm would do a similar thing, so I don't really know what the best approach would be, but for me that would check the boxes of like, being in a sensitive area and still doing the things that you want to be doing, so I mean, that's all I
Okay.
have.
Yeah, I had one more thing.
You may.
Thank you. The trench drain is gonna silt up so fast, it's not gonna work. It's just gonna be a nuisance when it's all done. I think the energy put into the berm might be a better alternative.
Even
All
if
for consideration
even
for
if
you.
we put filter fabric over it, you don't think it would work?
The growth of volume of water that comes down on a 2-inch rainfall over that area, you got 5,000 square feet. You see what the gallonage would be.
Well, you would know better than me, Mark.
Well, no, I think you're probably better with the math than I am.
Well, maybe the math, but,
Fact is,
right,
I'm just looking at the longevity of it.
right.
And the maintenance factor, because if you're gonna have that kind of thing around there, you're gonna have to maintain that surface to keep the water movement
Okay.
and not have the silt travel. And then the whole thing stops up and then it's just gonna be a puddle.
Got it.
Okay, so I can't comment on the construction details, I won't, but I would echo the Peter's concern, my one concern here, aside from the fact that you're basically taking what was once naturalized area and completely removing any vegetation there and making that permanent, which it's not great. But on top of that, you're gonna have a horse or horses there who will leave manure, which will cause nutrient problems. It's a huge problem in the town of Harwich, which a lot of people are aware of, but not everybody. I'd like to hear specifics about how you intend to deal with that. You know, Sophia was suggesting more vegetation. I'm not sure that solves the problem. And I also just say, even though it's outside of our jurisdiction, I actually forget what your lawn looked like, but please don't put any fertilizer on your lawn. I don't think that impacts the riverfront area, so we can't do anything about that. But if you're loading things up with horses, you might think about compensating by not pouring nitrogen onto your lawn. Other than that, I have no comments except
One more.
go for it.
When you reconfigure your presentation, perhaps it would be beneficial to include the manure management plan that's
Yeah.
going to be in the
That's what I was gonna
health
say.
application.
I've looked at the stipulations already for the Board of Health.
Board of Health.
Our plan is to get a manure dump trailer, which will be disposed of at least weekly.
Perfect.
Well, that's right.
From the area.
If that information's presented to
Okay.
the board, that may answer some questions
Yeah.
going forward.
Okay.
I guess my only other thing is you may find that this is the least impactful alternative, but we just do need that alternatives analysis for location, orientation, all that. Okay?
No, this is a good meeting. I appreciate everybody's input.
So our next available is September, it's a big agenda on September 18th. We would need things next Wednesday, or would you like October 2nd?
Would you be okay with October 2nd?
Yes.
I've got plans to go visit my brother, so I can't do the 18th, so October 2nd.
October
would be
2nd is okay?
better.
Can we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion, we, the 2 Rebecca Road, map 57, parcel A1-1, that we continue it to October 2nd, was it?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna,
Thank you.
scan the photos and include them in the
Perfect.
presentation.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have request for the
We're almost there.
cultivability for 88 Hoyt Road, map 15, parcel K4-3 for an in-ground swimming pool installation.
My name is Jeff Fanara. I represent the Hoeys from Bella Pools. I believe the board has a plan. They're asking for an RDA, is that what it is? Request for determination?
Yes.
Sorry. Can
All good.
all right. Here to answer any questions?
Sure.
Think of
Okay.
any.
So the project is only in a flood zone, and it's for a very small portion of the pool and a portion of the patio around the pool that's in the flood zone. They had to continue last time because they had to put the patio on the plan, which they now have done. We don't have mitigation requirements for hardscape in a flood zone. No mitigation is proposed. I did see that around 2018, the applicant did install a pretty extensive walkway fire pit area within the floodplain without getting any approvals. I think this is something we would have approved, because it is mainly pervious out there. But, and I don't think it would have any adverse impact in the event of a flood to any adjacent properties, but, so, I'm recommending that we approve the project and make this the new plan of record, which would essentially give approval for the things that were constructed without a permit in the floodplain, which were just landscape features back in about 2018. So I would recommend a -2 determination, and that no fertilizers or besides pesticides be allowed in our jurisdictional area.
Okay. All set, Amy?
All set.
Sophia?
I have no questions.
I have no questions, I agree with Amy.
Yep.
Right. I would just emphasize the no herbicides, pesticides, or fertilizers. That lawn is very green. I recall correctly from seeing it, and please don't do that. And particularly since, well, you're in the flood zone, but you're right near the Coldbrook thing, and pouring fertilizer onto your lawn undoes, you know, a $2 million project that's gone on to try to capture some of the nitrogen that is in the system, and you should not be putting nitrogen on the lawn there.
I'll relay that to the clients.
Please do. So, anything further? There's still people online. Nobody's typing up.
There's a few things that we still
They're
have
still
that are
not there
interesting.
yet. Okay, so, anyone care to make a motion on this?
I would move for approval for 88 Hoyt Road, map 15, parcel K4-3.
Second.
Is that for a -2?
Yes. Did I forget that? Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0.
Yeah, I'll take them. Thank you. We'll have this out to you in like a week or so. Signatures.
So, the next item is a filing for an extension permit for an order of conditions for 4 Shady Drive, map 73, parcel X180, SE 32-2482 for construction of a one-bedroom dwelling and mitigation plantings. We have someone here, or are you just gonna cover this?
I can speak to it if there's nobody present.
Doesn't appear to be.
So this was construction of a new single-family home on an undeveloped lot, and due to some extenuating circumstances, the owners have not been able to start the project. They have conveyed that they do hope to start in early 2025. The conditions on the site haven't changed. Our regulations, as they would pertain to this project, have not changed. So I would recommend a 3-year extension for 4 Shady Drive.
Any comments from commissioners? Anything? I don't have anything.
I'll make a motion for a extension for 3 years for 4 Shady Lane, map 73, parcel X180, SE number 32-2482.
I'll second.
4 Shady Drive, right? Is the correct?
Oh, I did it, yeah.
Okay, so further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Next is an order of conditions for 101 Sequatum Road, map 101, parcel X6, SE 32-2572 for demolition and rebuild of a home with mitigation plantings.
You have the draft conditions in your Dropbox. Happy to make any changes you see fit.
Do you have any comments or questions?
Nope.
Anyone else?
Nope.
I would move for approval of the order of conditions for 101 Sequatum Drive, project number SE 32-2572.
Second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. So we have a certificate of compliance for 22 Francis Road, map 56, parcel B3-1, SE 32-376, for the construction of a single-family home.
Good evening, Lynn Hamlin. Do you want me just to launch, Amy?
Whatever you'd like to do.
Okay.
If you want, I'll talk, and then if you have anything to add, we can do that.
Excuse me?
If you want, I'll say a few things, and if you have anything to add, you can, or you can do the presentation.
I'll make a quick one. I'm usually quick.
You go.
So we're trying to close out a 40-year-old order of conditions that was issued to 2 property owners prior to the current property owner. The attorney for the current property owner sought a certificate of compliance, and Amy came back with a list of items that were non-compliant on the property, most of which were done by the original property owner. And there is a statute of limitations on the timing related to when you can enforce the non-compliant issues. Interesting thing I learned recently from a workshop I was at with a bunch of lawyers that you might find interesting, that it's a 3-year statute of limitations, but that restarts with every transfer of property. Which I thought that was very interesting. So if something's 40 years ago, but you sold the property last week, the last week person becomes newly accountable for it. I just thought that was interesting. So this property owner has owned the property way beyond the 3 years, but notwithstanding, she tried to do a really good job in bringing the non-compliant items from the original property owner who got the order of conditions into compliance. A big thing was I managed to convince her to remove the shed in the backyard, which he put up and was there, and they took that down. They also incurred a large bill to put in dry wells, which were much more extensive than I've seen. So they did put the dry wells in that were never put in. The outdoor shower that's there, we submitted an as-built, is 75 feet away from the wetland. That's typical with the commission. They typically don't have a problem that long as it's outside the 50. The driveway is 20 years old. I did some mathematics. The original driveway was going to be allowed within the 50-foot buffer. The the existing driveway now, although bigger than the previous driveway, I did some mathematics, and you did not have a mitigation component to your regulations 20 years ago, but I calculated one anyway, giving her credit for what would have been permitted in 1984, according to the plan in the order. So I did some math. You can chime in if you didn't agree with me. And I came up with 258 square feet that would have been a net increase that they would have had to mitigate it for. And I don't even think I took the shed out, but that's okay. And so in my letter, I think everybody has a copy of my letter, there's an opportunity to create an understory in the unmaintained buffer zone, which I thought was the best place to do mitigation. And there's a little calculation on the internet that if you put in square footage and give them spacing, they magically give you the plant number. So that's the number that I used, and I picked some native species that I thought would do well there. It was really hot this summer, and when Amy and I were talking about how to bring this property into as much compliance as we could, we agreed that it was too hot to be planting shrubs, yet we needed to get on the agenda. These poor people moved to Texas thinking they had a buyer, and the buyer backed out because they couldn't get a certificate of compliance. So I have a letter of agreement, which I forwarded to Amy, drawn up by their attorney, Cartwright, that they agree to get the shrubs in by the end of the month. And they've done it. I mean, they took the shed down, they put the dry wells in. I'm not doubting that they'll get these shrubs in. They're really motivated to bring the property into compliance. So I think I'll stop there, and if you have anything to add.
Nope, I recommend the cert of compliance with that letter of commitment to do the shrubs. I think you've brought it into substantial enough compliance. I think it's reasonable.
Comments?
Nothing for me.
I'll go with Amy's recommendation.
Okay, I don't have anything to say.
I'll make a motion, we grant a certificate of compliance for 22 Francis Road, map 56, parcel B3-1, SE number 32-376.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That was your people on your board over there. Thank you.
Okay, next we have 2 certificates of compliance, which we can make part of the same discussion, I assume. One is for 5 Fiddlers Landing, map 6, parcel A1-8, SE 32-2375, for installation of a rock revetment, grading and plantings. The other for 5 Fiddlers Landing, map 6, parcel A1-8, SE 32-2469. Permit for the removal of an existing home, construction of a new house, salt marsh, and buffer zone restoration. Do you have someone online speak to this, or are
I
you?
mean, I'm prepared to recommend certs of compliance for both of them. They stuck to the plans. They have been supplying their monitoring plans. I did send an email to Amanda at Crawford Land Management, who I think is online here, just letting her know that some of the bayberry that was planted specifically in the more exposed northern section of the bank aren't doing so well. So whether to look at whether it was an irrigation issue that they died, or that species doesn't like that spot. Maybe to look at other ones, but those should be replaced because it's kind of a line of them across the bank. But provided that is addressed, I would recommend certs of compliance. And I just want to take the opportunity to tell the owners that they've done a fantastic job of complying with a condition that not a lot of people tend to comply with, which is the no fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. The yard looks good, but you can tell it is, there's grass, there's weeds, but it's a native seeded lawn, and that's how it should be, especially right up on the resource area. So we greatly appreciate that. And Amanda, I don't know if you have anything else to say.
I do. I wanted to thank everybody, one, for being here and hearing us, and Amy just, being with me today. But as she said, yes, our bread and butter is trying to make sure that we keep it as native as possible. We feel like the councilmen have done nothing but that moving forward. And in terms of the bayberry, we can do ongoing conditions if that's something that, the commission would be willing to adhere to figure out what the best way to move forward with that is. However, I will say it was just the bayberry overall from what I saw from the last time I was out there a bit ago. But the roses do seem to be doing very well. They are colonizing, showing new growth. So we felt as though that they met over the 90% requirement as of the COs, their ongoing conditions.
It does. I was just concerned that it was a very distinct swath, like an area. It wasn't like random plants here and there, that it was a very distinct area of bayberry where several in a row didn't take. So I would, as an ongoing condition, evaluate and replant that area this fall.
Absolutely.
Okay, comments or questions?
So this is for 2.
Right.
You can do 2 simultaneously if you want.
I just have one question, which is, what kind of roses?
Pasture rose, I believe.
Carolina?
Virginia here? Was it Carolina or Virginia here? similar.
I believe it was Virginia. I'll have to double check that, but I believe it was Virginia.
Yeah.
The original plan called for a mix, but because of the soils and stuff like that, we went with a certain type. But I'll double check that. I believe it was Virginia from what I remember.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I'll move for approval of the certificate of compliance for 5 Fiddler's Landing. Project SE 32, 2375, and project SE 32, 2469 together.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Okay. Aye.
4-0.
There are 2 sheets to this one that you need to sign, okay? Before we get to the CPC application, can I run something by you? We just need a signature. I accidentally did some of the wording wrong on a certificate, or on a order of conditions that we did in the spring. And I just needed, basically, I put special conditions for one owner, and I flip-flopped them. So the name on the property wasn't the same as what the project was for. So we had to fix that, so I need signatures for a new issuance for Hiawatha. You don't need to vote, you need to re-sign.
Can I ask a question? Are we signing, like, the copy of this?
Does it have
22
room for your signatures?
Francis Road? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The letter of agreement for the Fullers? I don't know, it's on my
No,
stack.
That's an old.
Wasn't that the one we just saw? Didn't we want to sign a letter?
24.
That's the agreement.
Okay. It was on my stack. Is that the one we should?
Yeah, it was supposed to be in mine, and I couldn't find it.
So we're all supposed
got
to
it.
sign this?
Please.
We'll go with,
You first.
like,
Sign
this
it
is
one sheet
bad.
on this, right?
official.
Wait a minute, did we get the one that we just did, I just gave you?
Yeah,
There's
this
2
is
of them
right here,
there.
isn't it?
2 of them.
2 pages.
There's 2 sheets
Yeah.
on top.
No, not that one, the
No,
one that John
The one John's
has.
got.
You gotta sign this.
Just keep them all together, okay?
Someone
Better-
should
better
double
than-
check our work. at the
Better
end.
than I do. So I basically allowed the Robinsons to do a revetment when they really wanted to tear down and rebuild their house or vice versa, so. That was a new one.
Details.
I haven't done something like that in a while.
Technicalities.
Right. They got all the way, they got actually, the problem is, they actually recorded it because the engineer didn't catch it either. So it's gonna be coming back to you for cert of compliance
Got it.
for an invalid order of conditions, and then the new one.
Yes.
And I felt so bad.
Wow, I like your signature.
Oh, thank you.
Do you wanna do the minutes real quick before we do the CPC application discussion?
Sure. I
What are we
read the
doing?
minutes, I have no comments.
Ditto.
Sherry's set of minutes.
Yay.
Yay. How do you spell your name, Sherry?
CHER.
That'll help.
Let me have that. Thank you.
Any other-
Actually, can I pass this, can you put this with Francis Road?
Yes.
The 32,376 file over there, the old one, please.
Okay.
Any
Trusting
other
you.
comments on the minutes? I move that we approve the minutes for the August 21st, 2024 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Okay, so CPC application.
So, I would like to submit a CPC application, whether you want it to be the Conservation Commission putting forth this application, or just me with your blessings, whichever way you want to do. But I've supplied some photos, but the area between the pedestrian bridge on the Herring River and where people park on North Road to the south is severely, severely impacted by the extensive recreational use of that area. It's degraded the marsh, and it's also long-term not going to be feasible for people to continue to use that path, even if the marsh was in good shape, because under extreme high tides, it's underwater at this point. I know we had chatted when we talked about the Bell's Neck Land Management Plan about various thoughts for this area. I would love to provide better access to people and allow them to continue recreation in that area, but enhance it. So what I've proposed is for study, design, and permitting of a raised 250-foot long boardwalk that extends from just inside of the tree line of the trail all the way to the bridge. And at the same time, have them look at the bridge, which I've been here 13 years, and no work's been done on the bridge in that time. And there was some concern, because originally I wasn't gonna look at the bridge itself, I was just gonna do the boardwalk, but several consultants who met me out there to give me an initial quote said that you should study the integrity of especially the pilings on this bridge. So I wanted to wrap that into this too. So we wanna continue, and I would be requesting, I suggest that we request funds, if you're in favor of this, from the recreation pot of Community Preservation Commission funds. It's such a highly used, beautiful area, and I think we can continue to allow that in a safer but more environmentally sensitive way. That marsh would grow back. We would be planning ahead to continue to allow access for sea level taking into account sea level rise. And I fully know that we're not going to be able to do design, construction, and design, permitting, construction all in 1 year. So the first year would just be for design and permitting. And I did seek out some initial quotes, which came in. I asked 5 people. I ended up getting 2. They came in between $130,000 and $140,000, and there's a budget breakdown here. I asked for a contingency there.
Is that just for the design and the permitting?
So I gave you, and it should be in your packet of what was on the table. So it's for different categories. It's pretty extensive. And I took this basically, the Horsley Witten group had given me the most detailed budget breakout. So they have 6 tasks. 1 is existing information review, project management and meetings. Then there would be field survey, wetland delineation, existing conditions plan. Task 3, geotechnical investigations and structural design. 4, alternatives analysis, which they have to do in the river, and a conceptual sketch plan. And task 5, design development at 75% for permitting, which is more than the other group, which was TRC, who's doing our Herring River study, only proposed to do 30% design plans for us. And then the permitting itself. So that came out to $140,000. CPC usually likes to see a contingency put in. I've estimated high at 20% contingency, because you never know what costs are gonna be in a year. And I would also be looking for other grant opportunities to help fund this as well. So I wanted to get the legwork done. It wasn't actually all that much. It was kind of interesting. And I mean, if I'm way off base, tell me and I'll stop. But if this is something you'd like to pursue, I would love your support for it.
I'm fine with it. If they need it, they need it. People can't utilize the resource, gotta give them some help.
I do have a question. I had mentioned rebuilding the auto bridge over that section. Obviously, that seems to have come off the table. What's your primary reason for that?
Primary reason for the auto bridge, taking an auto bridge?
Yeah. Obviously, the road would need to be reconstructed coming up to it, and it would have to be upgraded. It would be a significant project. But what's your base feeling on that?
it didn't seem that, to me, that other than maybe you and one other person, that there was support or recommendation to go in that,
Okay.
in that direction.
Okay.
No offense.
None taken. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me, Amy.
Also, in talking with public safety, that wasn't a concern of theirs. Should we improve the rest of the road for access that's south of this? They didn't see the need for another entry point. Should have put that there. So.
Fair enough.
I also fully support this. I think it's a good idea to go ahead. I have a technical question, which is, were you using the online application?
I was. It doesn't let me save things, and
But if you're logged in, you should have login credentials. This is my curiosity because that's an issue for other people,
I'm having an issue with it.
saving stuff.
It doesn't give me, so I can't save my work. And I was gonna mention it to Dave Nixon.
Yeah, but David just sent it to me because I put that whole thing together.
I can show it to you when we leave here, if you wanna see it, what it looks
So
like.
I thought that you as a town employee with town login credentials would be able to save stuff. Are you logged into the town website when you're doing this?
I wasn't logged in as me. I just went to the town website, clicked on the application, and started doing it from there. I mean, I was logged in my computer, as me.
All right, thank you.
We can,
No.
but I am
Yeah.
having issues. I was like a little frustrated. That's why I did the cut and paste, because I didn't want to lose all my work.
Yeah, I know that if you don't have town credentials, there's no way
you
around that,
can.
which is annoying, and other people have the same problem. Anyway,
I mean, I'm not done with it yet anyways. So
so
if I didn't have a chance to draft a letter of support. If I drafted a letter of support, maybe we could do it next meeting.
yeah, I think that's a good idea, because, I mean, you can always turn in the letter of support later.
I know, but I want to do it
Yeah,
to show
no,
to
it
the
would be-
beginning.
Yeah, no, it'd be good.
Have it look as complete as
Have it look
possible.
complete, and also not have to chew your cabbage twice or whatever.
And I'm planning provided I got your blessing for this, and I know you haven't voted yet, so you could be fooling me.
That's what we do.
But I was gonna go to Recreation Commission next, later in the month, so, and HCT.
Do we need to vote?
I would love for you to vote to support the CPC application.
I'll make a motion that we support Amy's draft application to the CPC for funding up through design of the boardwalk south of the North Road footbridge.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Would just say it's design and permitting.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Well, I very much appreciate it, and I was there today with Lily, just measuring the actual length, and there was several people there saying, "What the heck are you doing?" And everyone there was very supportive of this, because it's such a high-use recreational area there that people can enjoy, so.
Thanks for everything you do, Amy.
Thank you, guys.
I have a question. Any updates on the Main Street bog that we talked about at the end of the last meeting?
Yes, I have a little bit. I have a meeting next week, with the town trust and the Cape Tech about potential, and this is very preliminary, for incorporating some eco-restoration out there.
Town trust?
The Conservation
Oh,
Trust.
Conservation Trust.
And I have requested an update and haven't gotten it yet on where they're at kind of with their planning process for the rest of the property. But I haven't heard that from, But I'm hoping to, out of that meeting on Wednesday, to gain some additional enlightenment on where they're at there. So,
All right. We all done? Yes, no?
Seems that way.
Great. I'll make a motion, we adjourn the meeting of September 5th, 2024, of the Harwich Conservation Commission.
I'll second that.
Detailed enough?
Discussion? All those
wait,
in
did Sophia
favor?
get it? I think Sophia got the second.
Yeah.
I didn't even let him finish.
That's all right. All right. Another
All right.
fun time. Was
Good
had
job,
by
all.
That's all.